So imagine you spend like 12 years of your life grinding for a PhD in the United States.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a long time.
Right, 12 years. You finally launch this brilliant tech startup, and then you voluntarily pack it all up.
You just leave,
You leave, you move back to a country where, 40% of the roads are still dirt.
which is just, I mean, that's a massive shift.
It's insane. You really have to ask yourself, why would some of the smartest, most highly trained minds on Earth trade the psychological nightmare of the U.S. immigration system for the physical nightmare of an emerging market supply chain?
It sounds totally counterintuitive when you frame it like that.
Right.
But that specific trade-off is actually at the center of this massive structural shift happening right now in global economics and tech.
Yeah, and today's deep dive is dedicated to unpacking that exact shift. So we're looking at this growing reverse brain drain of top-tier talent moving from the U.S. back to India,
Right.
and how it intersects perfectly with India's really aggressive push to become the world's next manufacturing hub.
And we have a really robust stack of sources today to help us, figure this out.
We do. We've got a viral declaration from a returning startup founder, a comprehensive venture capital report from Stanford and the Institute for Competitiveness, plus a business relocation guide by Dazan Shira and Associates.
Which has some wild details in it, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. And a grounded supply chain reality check from Zetwork. And finally, this fascinating catalog of grassroots innovators from the KIITBI incubator.
So, yeah, our goal here is to really get to the bottom of the mechanics behind this trend for you. We're going to explore what actually pushes these founders out of the U.S., what specifically pulls them to India, and, the critical social infrastructure they're building.
Right, from ultra-cheap medical devices to these zero-waste cold chains. And of course, the severe operational realities of actually manufacturing hardware in a developing nation.
Because it is not easy.
No, not at all. So let's jump into the personal catalyst first, because, macro trends are just millions of individual choices stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, that makes sense.
This whole deep dive was really sparked by a startup co-founder named Karan Patil. He announced on social media that he was heading back to India after 12 years in the U.S.
And naturally, the internet made all sorts of assumptions.
Oh, of course. People were like, oh, his startup must have failed or he lost his visa.
But a quick look at his background completely disproves that. I mean, Patel spent 9 years doing a PhD building safety training systems for construction workers.
9 years.
Yeah. Then he spent another 3 years as a head of product at a startup. So he was deeply entrenched in building really complex, valuable technology.
Which makes his stated reason for leaving just hit so much harder. He wrote this incredibly raw statement. Let me read it. Instead of strategizing toward a meaningful life, preserving legal status became the outcome I had to optimize for.
Wow. Yeah, that phrase, optimizing for legal status, it really gets to the heart of the H-1B visa trap in the United States.
It's not just paperwork, is it?
No, not at all. The system inherently ties your legal right to exist in the country to a specific employer. So if you want to, say, spin up a Delaware C Corp and launch your own company, the legal gymnastics required to not accidentally violate your visa terms.
And face deportation.
Exactly. The risk of deportation is staggering.
It's like playing this deeply complex strategy video game where your objective is to build a thriving city. But a glitch in the game forces you to spend 100% of your energy just mashing a button to stop a game over timer from running out.
That is a perfect analogy. You never actually get to build the city.
You're just mashing the button.
Right. You're burning all this brilliant intellectual capital just on the mechanics of staying in the game. And Patil, he reframes his departure not as a defeat, but as a liberation. He explicitly stated he was reclaiming his freedom to pursue a new mission.
Okay, escaping a broken visa system makes total sense to me, but it really only explains why Patil left the U.S. It doesn't explain why he didn't just move to, I don't know, Canada or the U.K. or somewhere with a highly developed, frictionless business environment.
Why India? Right?
Yeah. What makes India the logical landing pad for this caliber of talent right now?
Well, that brings us to the macro pole. The global context here is the China plus one strategy.
Ah, right. We've seen that everywhere.
Yeah, global corporations and venture capitalists are under immense pressure to diversify their supply chains away from China, particularly in really sensitive sectors like technology, pharmaceuticals, and electronics.
And India is stepping up.
Big time. The Dzanshira Business Relocation Guide details how India recognized this opening and essentially rolled out a multi-billion-dollar welcoming map.
So let's dig into the mechanics of that welcoming map, because from the sources, the incentives they're offering are massive. For instance, the government recently amalgamated this tangled web of labor laws into just 4 major labor codes, just to make hiring easier.
And this is a much bigger deal than it sounds. Historically, India had dozens of overlapping colonial-era labor laws.
Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so if a manufacturing startup hired its 100th employee, they suddenly triggered this cascade of draconian compliance rules, like the old Factories Act, which literally dictated the number of spittoons a factory floor required.
Wait, spittoons? Are you serious?
Completely serious. It incentivized companies to stay small and informal just to avoid the headache. So consolidating these into 4 standardized codes removes that constant threat of accidental noncompliance.
So founders can actually confidently scale their workforce. That makes a lot of sense.
They're also deploying production-linked incentive schemes, or PLIs.
Yeah, I read about those. And from what I understand, this isn't just a tax break, right?
No, it's wild.
Yeah.
The government literally cuts a manufacturer a check based on a percentage of their incremental sales. They are directly subsidizing the cost of scaling domestic production. And they're pouring money into physical infrastructure too, like granting up to $13.4 million just to build medical device parks.
Okay, the medical device parks are a really prime example of solving a foundational bottleneck. Because, building a high-tech medical device requires expensive, specialized infrastructure.
Oh, totally. Sterilization facilities, electromagnetic interference testing labs, biomaterial testing.
A startup can't afford to build those from scratch?
Exactly. So by funding these shared infrastructure parks, the government lowers the barrier to entry so a founder can actually focus on product design instead of, building a testing lab.
I totally see the appeal. And the Dzanshira guide notes, India already has the industrial muscle to back this up. I mean, they hold a 20% global share in generic medicines. They supply 62% of the world's vaccine demand.
And they have 262 U.S. FDA-compliant pharmaceutical plants. That's the most outside the U.S.
Right. But okay, I am still a little skeptical. Is this entire migration just multinational corporations chasing cheaper labor? Because if it is just cost arbitrage, it doesn't really explain why a highly educated product head like Patil would go back to build something entirely new.
Yeah, your skepticism is totally warranted. But cost arbitrage is really the old paradigm. The Stanford and Institute for Competitiveness VC report maps out a fundamentally different ecosystem.
How so?
Well, India now has a 300 million strong internet subscriber base, plus a booming middle class that expects better healthcare, advanced consumer durables, and a fixed infrastructure.
Ah, so it's not just an export hub to send cheap goods back to the U.S. It is a massive, hungry domestic market.
Precisely. And global capital has recognized this shift. The Stanford report highlights an aggregate venture capital deal value of $109 billion in the India-U.S. corridor since 2009.
Wait, $109 billion? That's incredible.
Yeah, that is institutional money explicitly betting on India's digital transformation and its capacity to build and scale deep tech for its own population.
So we have brilliant minds escaping the U.S. visa trap, an overhauled regulatory system, shared industrial infrastructure, and $109 billion sloshing around the ecosystem.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. But what exactly are they building with all this? Because, when you look at the typical Silicon Valley startup pitch today, it often feels so trivial.
Right, like another B2B software platform that optimizes the email marketing of a different B2B software platform.
Exactly. It can feel so detached from physical reality.
Well, the Stanford report categorizes the Indian startup movement as impact investing, so pursuing financial returns alongside measurable social impact.
But even impact investing feels too clinical when you look at the catalog of grassroots innovators from the IIT TBI incubator.
I agree. It's much grittier than that.
Reading through that catalog, I didn't see typical tech founders. I saw, infrastructure mechanics. These returning talents and local innovators are literally fixing the plumbing and the life support systems of a developing nation.
Yeah, let's look at Arun Somasundaram. The Dzanshira guide mentioned the push for medical device parks because currently 86% of India's medical imaging devices are imported.
Which means a rural hospital faces a really stark choice. They can either buy a $1 million machine from a Western conglomerate, buy a refurbished machine that might break down in a month,
Or just go without medical imaging entirely, which is tragic.
it is. So Arun looked at that equation and built a CT scan from scratch that matches conventional image quality but costs 1/7 of the price.
1/7.
Right. And my immediate question was, how is that physically possible? You can't just bargain $1 million machine down to a fraction of the cost without fundamentally changing how it works.
You can't. You have to engineer the bloat out of it. Western CT scanners are designed for pristine, climate-controlled hospitals with perfect three-phase power grids.
They use incredibly expensive proprietary sensors, right?
Exactly. So innovators like Arun achieve these price drops by using off-the-shelf industrial components instead of proprietary medical ones. They rely on artificial intelligence and software to clean up the lower-resolution images.
Oh, wow.
And they design the machine to run on a standard single-phase power outlet or even battery backup.
So they are using software to compensate for cheaper hardware. That is brilliant.
It really is.
Then there is Vikram, who founded Asha Medical. Over 3.6 million people die from respiratory diseases in India every year, largely because mechanical ventilators are wildly expensive or highly specialized, like adult only or transport only.
And Vikram's team built a universal ventilator for neonatal, pediatric, and adult patients.
Right. But the detail that jumped out at me was zero running costs. How does a mechanical ventilator operate with zero running costs?
It's so smart. Standard Western ventilators require proprietary disposable flow sensors and specialized bacteria filters that have to be replaced constantly.
So it acts like a subscription model that just bleeds a rural clinic dry.
Yes. Asha Medical circumvents this by using standardized, easily sterilizable mechanical parts. And they rely on advanced algorithms that calculate airflow based on pressure differentials within the machine.
Oh, so completely eliminating the need for a physical, disposable flow sensor.
Exactly. It's fascinating to see social responsibility integrated directly into the engineering constraints.
And we also see this exact same motivation in the food and medicine supply chains. This whole focus on uplifting the quality of life is driving founders like Dr. Rijeesh Keloth.
Yes, his work with Celsius is a perfect example of this reverse brain drain tackling core infrastructural issues.
Because it doesn't matter if you manufacture a cheap vaccine or grow perfect produce if, like, 40% of it rots in a sweltering truck before it even reaches a village.
The cold chain is such a critical piece of invisible infrastructure, and it's vital for actually improving public health and food security.
Right. So founders like Dr. Keloth are building these zero-wastage solutions by utilizing decentralized digital platforms.
How does it work practically?
They attach IoT thermal sensors to thousands of independent refrigerated trucks all across the country, and it creates a centralized dashboard that tracks temperature drops in real time.
So if a truck's cooling unit fails on a highway in Rajasthan,
The system alerts the driver and routes them to a repair facility before the cargo spoils. They are essentially mapping a logistical underworld to stop the waste of life-saving medicine and food.
that mapping aspect reminds me of fluid robotics. Asim Balarao and Nidhi Jain are dealing with a problem most people just ignore. 50 billion liters of raw sewage discharged daily in India, mostly untreated.
50 billion liters, that's horrifying.
It is, and the root cause of that untreated discharge is often a complete lack of data. Municipalities simply do not have blueprints for their own underground wastewater infrastructure.
So Fluid Robotics builds these tethered robots equipped with sensors and cameras to literally swim through the drains and map the sewer systems.
They are digitizing the physical underworld to stop sanitary sewer overflows.
But, okay, this brings up a massive question regarding another founder in the Kai-ATBI catalog, Aroshil Namarakpem.
Oh, the tea industry project.
Yeah. He spent 10 years in the U.S., came back, and teamed up with his father to modernize the tea industry in Northeast India using IoT and blockchain.
Right.
Okay, stop right there. I have to call this out. We are talking about rural agriculture in a country where power cuts are a daily reality.
A very fair point.
How on earth you run an always-online IoT blockchain system without reliable power or internet?
It is a vital question, and it highlights the difference between Silicon Valley buzzwords and actual applied engineering.
Okay, so what's the workaround?
You don't use standard Wi-Fi or broadband. You use low-power, wide-area networks like LoRaWAN, which can transmit small packets of data over long distances using very little battery.
I see.
So the sensors on the tea farms collect data on soil moisture and temperature, and if the network drops, they just store the data locally on flash memory and sync it the moment the connection is restored.
Okay, so the hardware is resilient. That makes sense. But why blockchain? That usually feels like a solution in search of a problem, you know?
Usually, yes. But in a fragmented rural supply chain, trust is the actual problem.
How so?
If a farmer claims their tea is organically grown to secure a premium price from a European buyer, they usually have to pay a corruptible central authority or middleman to certify it.
Oh, of course.
By logging the pesticide use and soil data immutably on a blockchain, the farmer mathematically proves the origin and quality of the tea directly to the buyer. It cuts out the middleman entirely.
Wow. So the technology isn't a gimmick at all. It is a direct workaround for institutional trust deficits.
Exactly. It is incredibly ambitious.
It is. But we really need to ground this conversation because designing a cheap CT scan or a rugged IoT sensor in a lab is maybe, what, 10% of the battle?
If that,
Actually manufacturing it at scale is where dreams usually die. And the Zetwork supply chain report provides a very sobering reality check here.
it really does. It forces us to look at the severe physical friction these founders face. The most glaring statistic from Zetwork is that 90% of Indian manufacturers are small and medium-sized enterprises.
Wait, 90%?
Yes, the supply base is violently fragmented.
So if you are building a complex medical device, you are not handing a blueprint to a massive, vertically integrated megafactory like you might in Shenzhen.
Not at all.
It is more like trying to bake a highly precise, multi-tiered wedding cake, but you are forced to source your flour, sugar, and eggs from 50 different farmers who all use completely different measuring cups.
That variance is the absolute killer of hardware startups, and the Zetwork data quantifies that variance.
Yeah.
Only 44.9% of these Indian manufacturers possess international quality certifications.
That's less than half.
Right. Because the baseline standardization is so low, companies have to spend up to 10% of their total production cost just managing quality control. They are constantly testing and discarding subpar components.
And that is before the product even leaves the factory floor. The logistics data in that report very blew my mind. Freight speeds in India are 50 to 60% slower than in the US.
It's a crawl.
And logistics consume 13 to 14% of the GDP, compared to about 8% in developed nations. Oh, and over 30% of villages don't even have all-weather roads.
Think about that. You are building advanced technology in an environment where 40% of the roads are dirt and monsoons regularly wash away transit routes.
It's wild.
Furthermore, routine power cuts have been shown to drop overall factory production by a full 10%.
How does anyone survive that? I mean, if you are a founder trying to build a zero-waste cold chain or a robotic sewer mapper, you cannot just copy and paste a business plan from San Francisco.
You absolutely cannot. The Zetwork report outlines an entirely different operational playbook for this.
What does that look like?
First, you're operating in a market with significant intellectual property risks and a very slow judicial system. So you rely less on courts and more on building deep, entrenched relationships with local suppliers.
So you can't just manage your supply chain from a spreadsheet in an air-conditioned office.
Exactly. You have to be physically present on the factory floors, teaching your suppliers how to meet your tolerances.
And you basically have to engineer paranoia into your business model.
Constantly. You assume the power will fail, so you overinvest in generator backups. You assume a supplier will miss a delivery, so you dual source or triple source every single component.
The founders who survive this environment are not just brilliant software engineers. They are masters of operational resilience.
Which brings us back to the core trade-off we discussed at the very beginning. These founders are voluntarily trading the psychological friction of the U.S. immigration treadmill for the physical friction of an emerging market supply chain.
It really is a profound shift in how we define innovation. I mean, in the West, innovation is usually about pushing the absolute boundary of what is technologically possible.
Like building the fastest chip or the most complex AI.
Yeah. But in India, for these returning founders, innovation is about pushing the boundary of what is operationally possible in the face of massive physical constraints.
It's a completely different mindset.
So what does this all mean for the broader global picture? We've unpacked a really highly dynamic ecosystem today.
Yeah, this reverse brain drain is not just a simple story of homesick engineers.
Not at all. It is driven by top-tier talent, exhausted by optimizing their lives around visa timers, hungry to do work that actually matters and uplifts people's lives.
And they are returning to a government that is desperately clearing regulatory hurdles and a venture capital environment flush with over $100 billion to back them.
Yet, their day-to-day reality is this grueling fight to impose order on a chaotic, fragmented industrial base, all while trying to solve the Global South's most pressing infrastructural needs.
It is a monumental challenge.
It is, which leaves you, the listener, with a final thought to ponder today. We have spent the last few minutes detailing the brutal constraints of the Indian market, the dirt roads, the power cuts, the fragmented suppliers.
But history shows us that severe constraints breed the most disruptive solutions.
Exactly. Think about Arun's CT scan that runs on a fraction of the power at 1/7 the cost. Or Vikram's ventilator that requires no expensive disposable parts. Or Dr. Keloth's zero-wastage cold chains mapping thermal data across dirt roads.
If this wave of returning talent actually manages to scale these ultra-low-cost, high-impact technologies to serve 1 billion people, what happens next?
That's the million-dollar question. Could the very infrastructural constraints of India force the creation of rugged, affordable tech that eventually exports outward?
And completely disrupts the bloated, incredibly expensive healthcare and supply chain systems of the West.
It is a very real possibility. The solutions designed to survive the hardest markets often end up conquering the most lucrative ones.
It really makes you rethink the whole concept of where the future's being built.
It does. Maybe the next massive global breakthrough isn't waiting in a pristine lab in Silicon Valley. Maybe it's currently stuck in traffic on a dirt road in Mumbai waiting to change the world.